Hi friends. I'm on the beach, and as you can see, it's beautiful and bright and blue sky out here, so forgive me if I'm a little squinty, but it's a beautiful bright day. I wanted to just do a little Stories by the Sea, which I haven't done in quite a while. And the name Stories by the Sea came from a friend and colleague of mine who had nicknamed these little stories I would share when I was on my ocean visits as Stories by the Sea, so that's where that came from. And I wanted to talk a little bit about taking time off. And I don't mean like vacation from work, but I mean from your practice. So when I went to Calgary, which I did a few weeks ago, to go back to go visit and to see people, which I hadn't been in 3 years since the before times, since pre-COVID. And I ran into a former student in the security lineup, and she told me that she had not been back to yoga since the first shutdown, where everybody shut down. So she hadn't been back to a studio in like 3 years. And part of that was fear-based, because of course when the governing bodies keep shutting yoga classes down repeatedly, then the public gets the idea that it's not safe to go to yoga. Turns out that is all false, but this is what happened. And then I think so part of it starts there. And then what happens is when we get out of the habit of doing something, then it's harder to start doing it again. So, when you had your regular yoga classes that you used to go to, and then you stop for a while, you become no longer in the habit. It's no longer part of your routine, part of your ritual. And so then it makes coming back to it almost as hard as coming to it the first time. Sometimes even harder, because there's a sense of sort of guilt or shame sometimes with that as well. I know I should do this because it makes me feel so much better. I know I really should be doing this. And then that makes it harder to do it because you're shoulding all over yourself. So that was one story. And then a few weeks later, I'm back and I run into a former student from another studio I used to teach at. And she says the same thing. I haven't been to yoga in 3 years. I haven't been since the first shutdown. And so this time I asked her, I was like, so, was it a fear of like catching COVID? And she said, no. And she said, maybe in the very beginning, she said, but it just became kind of out of her routine. And then her studio that she used to go to closed, which in our little city, we've lost 6 studios, which is a lot in our industry to lose 6 studios. And so she lost those studios, or that studio, and it just felt like hard to go somewhere else, because going to that studio in that specific location was part of her routine. Seeing those same faces, the same teachers. And so then to go somewhere new all over again and start from scratch felt, again, like starting all over again, but almost harder, because now you've had the 3 years off and you've been shoulding all over yourself about the fact that you should go. So when you first go to yoga, you've never been before, there's no shoulding, right? There's no like, oh, I should do this because I know it makes me feel better, or I should do this because it helps with my anxiety, or it helps my sleep, or it helps my digestion, or whatever it is. Before you go to yoga, you don't know all of that yet. And so there isn't that additional layer of guilt from sort of shoulding all over yourself. So both of them confessed that they hadn't been in 3 years, and I think they were both expecting me to give them a guilt trip, which I didn't. I just wanted to understand, ask them questions about why that was, how they were feeling about it. And then there's a relatable story in my own life. So I've been Buddhist for a long time. I'm trying to do the math in my head, probably over 20 years. And when I lived in Calgary, I had a group that I regularly sat with, for sure on the weekends, and then sometimes on Tuesdays. I had a teacher I had a Sangha, which is what they call a group of people that are practicing in a spiritual way together. I had a Sangha. And then when I moved to Victoria, I tried to find one, and they just weren't a fit. I couldn't find one that was a fit. And then the one that I thought might be a fit, and but the classes ran at a night I was committed to teaching, but when I had a little time off, I thought, well, maybe I'll go check it out, because if it really is a fit, I'll try to move my classes around. And then just as I did, they stopped doing their classes, not because of COVID, but just before this. So I've been without a spiritual practice, without a spiritual community for 7 years since I've been here. Not that I didn't keep up my own practices, for sure I did. I was meditating, I was reading, I was practicing, and really the biggest part of a practice like that is walking your talk, is taking it outside into the world. So, going by people on the street and thinking, may you be well, may you be happy, So taking my practice sort of off the cushion, out of the weekly Sangha meeting and into my real life, that was all still happening. But I would say about 1.5 years into COVID, I stopped my formal seated meditation practice. It's not that I intended to stop. It's not like I was like, I'm going to stop doing this. It was just that my whole routine had changed because, we were in lockdown and like everybody else. And then my work hours changed and I was Zooming and then not. And then everything was so chaotic that I couldn't seem to find a time that was consistent that I could practice, because my whole schedule and routine had been thrown off completely. I'm sure some of you can relate. And so then, as things do, before you know it, time ticked on and I realized, oh my gosh, it's been like over 1 year for sure, maybe more like almost 1.5 years before I had a formal daily seated meditation practice. Whereas before that, I pretty much always sat every single day. And at first I was fine with it because I kind of didn't realize how long it had been, and I was still bringing the teachings like out into my life. Then I really started to notice the effects of it on my nervous system, and how that regular sit, to take that time to be quiet and still and observe, had really, not doing that on a daily basis had really started to affect how I was feeling as far as my sleep and my anxiety levels and all of those things. So it became clear that this was a problem, that I should be doing this. But I still hadn't found a Sangha. And then I listened to a podcast where somebody was interviewed. I'll tag her below this when I post it. And I really liked just her vibe and her style and some of the things that she said. And so I did what one does. I started following her on Instagram. And I had been putting it out there, that I would really like to find a Sangha and a teacher, but I had also putting out there that I would like a matriarch or a female teacher as well. And I wasn't thinking necessarily in the Buddhism. I thought maybe with yoga, but either way, I was putting those things out there. And started following her for a while, and then she posted that she has a year-long practitioner program. And so I jumped headfirst. I'd never done a formal training with her. I'd never gone on retreat with her. I'd never sat with her. I'd seen, of course, snippets of her talks and stuff like that on Instagram. But that was really the gist of all I knew about her. But I knew that I needed to have a regular schedule, again, of sitting. And so this program meets like once a month, essentially, except October, we're twice a month. And it's, 6 hours, and it actually fell on my day off, so I could actually do it, which that's the other hard part for me normally, is that as a yoga teacher, I'm working when y'all aren't working so that you can come to yoga, which means then things like classes for myself to take are really hard. It's hard to find yoga classes and meditation classes and things like that to take because I'm working evenings and weekends. So the fact that it fell on my day off and that it was even in my time zone allowed me to actually sign up for it and to go on with that. So I had my first one on Saturday, and it was amazing to just already be just sitting in a group of like-minded folks and to just be sitting and to be meditating and to be learning. And my heart instantly knew that this is what had been missing. So the moral of the story is, sometimes, even though we know something's really good for us and that it makes us feel better and that we, air quotes, should be doing it, please don't should all over yourself, we take a break. And then the longer the break goes, the worse we feel about ourselves for having taken the break. And also, the harder it is to come back because it's no longer part of our daily routine or our weekly ritual or however often you were doing these things. When it is no longer part of your ritual, part of your routine, then it makes it harder to create that habit again. So I wanted to just share that with you, that if you have taken a break from your yoga over COVID times, whether that's all of COVID times or part of COVID times, and you keep telling yourself that you should come back, and then that makes you feel guilt and shame, and so then you don't do anything and you don't come back, don't shit all over yourself. And if you haven't practiced because your beloved studio, which most people don't realize if they don't practice at a studio, that often yoga studios are like someone's third home. You know, there's like work, home, and the yoga space. And so if you find that you haven't been practicing because that third space has gone under, so many yoga studios have lost their businesses, which means there's all of these yoga communities that are wandering around aimlessly without a yoga home. So if that's the reason you haven't been practicing, again, don't should all over yourself. Try to put yourself back in beginner's mind before you ever did yoga and start there. Try a new class, try a new studio, join a Zoom class, whatever it takes to bring yourself back. And know that regardless of how long it's been, yoga doesn't judge. We do the judging, we humans, right? Yoga itself, not judging you for not practicing yoga. Yoga is always waiting there with open arms to welcome you back when you are ready. So I hope that that's helpful in case some of you have been shooting all over yourself and have taken a substantial break from your practice. Just come back. It doesn't matter if it's a small amount of a commitment. It might be a new studio. You might have to find a new third place, but you can do it. All right. I hope that you're all well. I'm going to leave you with a little shot of this amazingness that I'm sitting in before I log off. One of the things I love the most about the beach in the autumn is that there's hardly anyone here. Like maybe 4 people that I can see. So it's very peaceful, very quiet. So I hope that this was helpful. And if you haven't taken a break from your yoga and you've watched this whole thing, hopefully the shot of the ocean was worth you investing your time. All right, friends.